The environmental justice movement is basically about the idea that any struggle against environmental disasters, the struggle against climate change, the movement for environmental justice must fundamentally be a struggle against racism. The environmental justice movement, like all good things, was born in struggle in North Carolina in 1982 in Warren County, North Carolina, which is part of the Black Belt. It's a majority black county in northeastern North Carolina, where the state decided to locate a toxic PCB landfill in 1982. With march after march, with intense civil disobedience resulting in over 500 arrests. Now, this is not 500 arrests in Washington, D.C. or New York City or Philadelphia. This is 500 arrests in a small rural county in North Carolina, majority black county, North Carolina. They ended up the environmental justice movement was born. They didn't defeat the landfill, but they have since pushed it back and gotten it cleaned up. Now, I want to fast forward to the year 1999. Before there was Katrina or Rita or the Superstorm Sandy, there was a hurricane many of you may not have heard about, but which was devastating to eastern North Carolina, especially to the Black Belt, and that was Hurricane Floyd in 1999. Hurricane Floyd decimated counties like Warren County, Halifax County, Northampton County, Edgecombe County, all of these majority black counties that had been the historic home to some of the largest plantations in the South and were still majority black counties. Now, why was this hurricane so decimating to these communities in eastern North Carolina? It's not simply the natural disaster itself, as we know, but it's part of this systemic racism and the historic underdevelopment of these counties, where 2.7 million people in North Carolina still get their water from private wells. That's almost a third of the population doesn't have what we all think of as a basic right of municipal water, but gets their water only from private wells. 52% of all of North Carolina, especially in the majority black eastern part of the state, relies on groundwater of some variety for their drinking water. And yet this is also home to more than 8 million hogs and an equal number of chickens and turkeys who don't have their sewage treated in the same way with the same regulations that human waste is treated. The treatment consists simply of leaving the raw sewage in open pits, in open lagoons in the ground. So when Floyd came through, the entire eastern part of the state was covered in hog waste and hog sewage. The town of Princeville, it's a small town in eastern North Carolina, which you may not have heard of, but you should have, because it's the nation's oldest town that was chartered by African Americans. It had been a Union encampment following Sherman's march north, where freed slaves found refuge and later chartered their own town. It was completely destroyed by Hurricane Floyd. And what did FEMA do? Their reaction to Sandy, their reaction to Katrina was all things that they had learned from the way they treated folks in Floyd and eastern North Carolina. FEMA refused to offer any vouchers or any assistance to rebuild Princeville, but said, we'll only give you assistance if you agree to move away and move somewhere else. That was their only response. Needless to say, the residents of Princeville refused to leave, are still in control in that town, and I want to close with a little message of hope, which is the same day that Floyd hit eastern North Carolina marks the formation of the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, which is, many of you may know and have heard speakers from the Environmental Justice Network at other conferences. I have the privilege to work with them across eastern North Carolina. It's a really unique movement because not only is it one of the strongest movements I know of that is based among rural African Americans in the U.S. South, but it not only unites these rural communities with each other across the state despite their separation and isolation, but I just had the privilege to go to their annual North Carolina Environmental Justice Network Summit, their annual summit, where they had representatives from FLOC, from the Farm Labor Organizing Committee. They had UFCW workers who work at the packing houses where these hogs are slaughtered, the union that I used to work for organizing the world's largest pork processing plant. They had workers and union representatives organizing Purdue plants where the chickens and turkeys are slaughtered, because the residents of these communities who are still struggling to rebuild 13, 14 years later from Hurricane Floyd know that only by, as Ben talked about the importance of students uniting with the worker struggle, know only that by uniting with the workers in these packing house plants and with the farm workers Can they build a movement against racism in North Carolina? And can they build a movement capable of challenging the U.S. government's racist exploitation of these natural disasters and the continued climate change?